If you've ever felt like you can't hear the difference between a major third and a perfect fifth or any other interval, you're not alone. Research shows that 90% of musicians actually do have trouble hearing these intervals. And a lot of times this is compounded by the fact that we use terms like tone deaf. We tell ourselves that, oh, well, I can't develop my ear, I'm just tone deaf. When in a lot of cases, it's just that you haven't been exposed in the right way. And when you get the right exposure and the right training, then you will start to hear the differences between these intervals without resorting to songs and other gimmicks. So I want to talk a little bit about the different methods you can use and some basic tricks that'll get you started kind of on the right path so you don't make some mistakes that will require retraining to kind of fix you later on. So I'll start a little bit about myself. My name's Kevin Ure. I'm a former university professor. I taught ear training and music theory from the most basic to most advanced levels, all the way from undergraduate to graduate level, doctoral students. And lately I have left that world and I am now training students to pass their graduate entrance exams or to pass their undergraduate programs. And I'm helping musicians train their ear, and I'm working privately with professional composers and other professors to really help improve their skills so they can become more effective at their jobs. So that's kind of what I do now. So I want to talk to you about how to start identifying musical intervals by ear using very simple and proven techniques. These are the ones that I've seen work over and over again. They're very basic. They're things that you can do on your own, and that's kind of the goal here. It doesn't matter what your goal is. We just want to develop that ear and improve it. You don't need perfect pitch. I want to start with that. A lot of people think that you need perfect pitch, and while it seems like it would be nice to have, I have to tell you that in my time teaching in the university, I often came across probably a pretty high level, but there would always be at least one or two people in every class. I think in my 8 years of teaching, there was one class, one time, where none of the students had perfect pitch. And later on in the semester, I discovered one student actually did. They were just being intelligent and not telling me about it. So word got around that I started to test the people with perfect pitch a little differently than the people with relative pitch because I know your weaknesses. The thing with perfect pitch is you'll be able to sing a melody if you know what the notes are. But the moment I tell you to transpose a melody, like if I ask somebody to sing Happy Birthday, most of us can more or less sing it on key. And if I say, okay, we're going to start in a new pitch, we can change and just sing it. We don't have to think. We just do it. Well, with perfect pitch, they don't have to think about the notes. They just know them. But they often do have to be able to know exactly what notes they're singing in order to sing it properly. And so I would use different keys. I'd give them printed music, let's just say in the key of C major, and we'd sing it in B flat or A sharp. The rest of the kids didn't have problems with that, but 9 times out of 10, if you had perfect pitch, that would throw you. And there are a lot of other techniques. So there's pros and cons of perfect pitch, but what everybody needs, including people with perfect pitch, is a really strong relative pitch. So that's what we're focusing on. So let's talk a little bit about some of the myths, methods, and some steps you can use to help improve your ear. Okay, so let's start with what is a musical interval. An interval is just a distance between two things. If you're running an interval, maybe you're running 50 feet, maybe you're running a minute. It's just a measurement. And so what we do in music is we measure the most common sounds that we have. These birds you hear in the background, they are singing intervals. Some of them are large, some of them are small. And what we can do is we have taken these intervals and we've sort of tempered them, we've adjusted them slightly so that we can fit 12 equally spaced notes on, for example, a piano. And then if I play from one key to the next key, it always has the same distance, the same interval. So what we call a half step or a minor second. And that stays consistent. That's the goal anyway. With birdsong, things we find in nature, minor seconds aren't always perfect minor seconds. Generally the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth, another type of interval, a distance, a fifth is larger than a fourth. Those maintain a pretty set standard that even the birds will sing in tune. But the idea here is that an interval is just the distance between two notes. And we can label them, which makes it easier for us to talk about them and hear music. So when it comes to relating intervals to harmony, melody, and musicianship, I actually think there's a precursor to ear training, and that comes to just going to a piano or an instrument and listening to a note and trying to hear it from all sides. What does it sound like? What mood does it have? What is a subtle characteristic that can be used to describe it? And then you forget about the description and you compare it to another note. So one of the things I do on my audiation course, my completely audio-based audiation course, is I have them start in an E flat and compare it to a C. And they're not meant to remember the difference between E flat and C. They're meant to only recognize and accept there's some subtle difference that doesn't need to be defined, but there's something that makes the E flat and C different. And that's all we do in these interval training courses. So that's kind of foundational, and that is what I would tell you to start with, is just start playing two notes on the piano, the same two notes for a month, just two notes, and try and hear if there's some subtle difference. It's not just that the note that you play that's higher is higher and the other one's lower. Maybe there's a roundness to the higher note. Maybe there's a brightness to the higher note that the lower one doesn't have. Maybe it reminds you of something, like a mood, an object. You want to really think about how the notes are clearly, there's some subtle difference. And the moment you try and focus on that difference, it will go away. So that's normal. That's not what you're trying to do. Again, you're not trying to develop perfect pitch where you can recognize these notes. You're just training the ear to listen more deeply into sound. That's all that is. And you do it by listening to one note and then comparing it to a second. So that's kind of the first thing. And then the next thing is, once you do that, we can start to identify intervals. Now, I recommend people start with the perfect fifth. The perfect fifth is foundational. When we have cadences, which is something that helps us know that a phrase is coming to a close, we get the interval of a 5 to 1 in the bass in most cases, in a lot of cases. We can get into more modern music where that doesn't happen, but the vast majority of popular music, church music, any type of music that's essentially revolving around a single pitch, a melody you can sing really easily, like Happy Birthday, that is going to be something that really focuses on the perfect fifth. In fact, bum, bum, happy birthday. Oh, that's Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I'm getting confused. Twinkle, twinkle. That is actually a perfect fifth. Little star. And then that's a neighbor to the perfect fifth. So the perfect fifth is really common in a lot of music. And it's really important we learn that one first. Because when you can learn the perfect fifth, then it becomes fully ingrained in our ear, and we can start hearing how it's moving within the harmonies and chords of music. The next interval I suggest is a perfect fourth, and I suggest you compare them at first. Don't sing Here Comes a Bride for a fourth, bum, 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 bum. Don't do that. What you should do instead is sing it over and over again. Bum, 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 and then go up a half step. Bum, 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 and then do it with the perfect fifth as well. Bum, 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 and you just keep doing this, and you do this every day. And then this is where it gets difficult. You either have to record yourself playing intervals, so playing a perfect fourth or a perfect fifth, or have somebody play it for you, or you can use an app. But if you're going to use an app, you need to use several different apps, because if you just use one app, you're going to get really good at identifying the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth as that app has presented it. And if you're using an app, then this mirror exercise I'm talking about, which you can get for over on my website, it's just the daily routines and mirror exercises, part of the technique builder. You can follow those exercises, learn what those intervals sound like, and then if you're using an app, it's not so bad. It will start to translate to real world work. But the best way to do it is to have somebody or yourself record a bunch of fourths and fifths and then tell you the answer after a few seconds. So maybe I'll go bum bum, perfect fourth, bum bum, perfect fifth. And the goal is for you to answer before the answer is given to you. So that's how I recommend you start. And then you go major third, minor third once you've mastered the fourth and fifth. After that, major six, minor six, because now we have all the fundamentals to hear inversions and triads. And then you can go on to the major seventh, minor seventh, major second, minor second, tritone. And you can learn all your intervals that way. But here's the trick. You're going to think, oh, it's taking me so long to learn the fifth and the fourth. I can't hear the difference. Just do it every day. You will start to hear the difference. Let's do a little test here. Okay. Try and sing a familiar tune. Doesn't matter what it is. Happy Birthday. I sang Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars. Apparently my wires got crossed. But sing a song that's familiar to you. If you can sing it relatively in tune, then guess what? You're not tone deaf. If you don't do this, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. If you can basically get the contour, even happy birthday to you, something close to it, you're not tone deaf, your ear can be trained. But if you can't even tell if you're going higher or lower, you need private lessons and you need an evaluation, because it is possible then you're part of the 4% of the population that maybe is tone deaf. Not sure on that number, but I believe it's about 4%. That's what I came across at one point. So if you're tone deaf, then you just need extra work. I actually had a student, I'm not going to describe too much about this student, excellent musician, actually didn't understand how this particular student could play so well, because this student was truly tone deaf. Could not tell if a note was going up or down. But months and months of practice, the student started to be able to hear if a note was going up or down. And then this student didn't develop relative pitch. They actually developed perfect pitch, which makes a lot of sense to me, because with perfect pitch, oftentimes at kind of I'm going to call it a more base level, sometimes people with perfect pitch can't tell if they're hearing a high E or a low E. Or if I play a C and an E and the C's on the bottom, they don't know if the C's on the bottom or on the top. And so they get confused. They'll say, is that a major third or a minor six? If the E's on the bottom, it's a minor six. If the C's on the bottom, it's a major third. They can't tell. And so they'll get that interval wrong, even though they can get the notes right. And so it kind of made sense that this student would be able to develop a little bit of perfect pitch. It still wasn't outstanding, but over time, they were able to start hearing when notes were going higher and lower. So that was really promising. And then they kept going, practicing a lot of other techniques. This was back when I was in college and I was just kind of helping out just because it was a friend and I was curious to see if I could help, and also I wanted to help this particular person out. But I'm not sure where that ended up. But they started to develop this ability to at least tell when things were going higher or lower, which is really promising. And today I feel like that would be enough to eventually help them hear intervals. So you're probably not tone deaf. That's kind of what I'm going for here. All right. Now, don't get behind this kind of psychology that you can't hear intervals, okay? I don't want you to think I just can't hear intervals. If you could sing Happy Birthday mostly in tune, you could tell when it's going higher or lower, you're not tone deaf, you can hear intervals. You just haven't been trained properly. And if you tell yourself constantly you can't do something, guess what? You won't be able to do it. I mean, I remember when I first started teaching, I was talking to a student and the student said they just get so nervous. And I understood that because I used to get so nervous teaching really in my first 2 or 3 years. And I said, yeah, anxiety and nerves are kind of this horrible thing, because if you can just feel confident in what you're doing, you can do almost anything. Like once you have that confidence, that's when everything else becomes easier. Even with public speaking, like me talking to a camera, sometimes I'll get nervous talking to a camera, but it's far less than what I started with. And the important thing is for you not to go out there and say, I can't do something, because you probably can, right? But if you come out and you're instantly telling yourself you can't, then you probably won't. You'll give up. It'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy. All right, so let's talk. We talked about the foundational intervals to learn first. Start with those perfect intervals, move on to the major, minor, third, because they build chords, and then the major, minor, sixth, because they build inversions, along with the other intervals we've learned so far. And then the major, minor, seventh, those build additional chords, more advanced ones if you want to think of it that way. And then we can go on to major, minor, second, tritone. All right, so the first thing that I would recommend you do is get a keyboard. It can be a cheap keyboard, but try not to use anything like on an app or something. Get that tactile response going, and just pick two notes, any two notes on the keyboard. Play both of them at the same time. Listen for the bottom one, really try and hear it, and then play that note. Then listen for the top one, try and hear it and sing it for both the bottom and the top, and then play it. And do this until you can really hear enough of these intervals in a row where hearing two notes at the same time is easy. And then try and hear three notes, maybe two with your left hand, one with your right, or switch it up. And then hear four notes, and then go to five, and then go to six. This is a foundational exercise that will allow you to start opening up your ear so you can hear more specific intervals like the perfect fifth and perfect fourth. Once you've done that, you should learn how to play a perfect fifth and a perfect fourth. So if you have a note, any note on the piano, and you count up 7, so C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, right? From the C to the G is 7 half steps. So that's the distance. That means you don't count the first note. So C sharp's the first note. You can learn to play a perfect fifth that way. It's always going to be 7 half steps away, whether you do it above or below. So go ahead and play a perfect fifth, and then count up 5 half steps. So if you start on C, C is your bass note, you play your C, then you go C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F. That's your perfect fourth. And now you can compare your perfect fifth and your perfect fourth. And just listen to the differences in sound. Just get into the pitches and try and hear what they sound like. That's going to help you to start hearing the quality of the fifth and the fourth. And notice that a fifth is open sounding compared to the fourth. Eventually, you're not going to be sitting here thinking, okay, I heard an open sounding interval, that must be a perfect fifth. That's not how it works. But you will start by kind of hearing a difference between the fifth and the fourth, and then over time, doing singing exercises, listening to these on the piano, you will be able to hear the difference without resorting to any kind of gimmicks, and then it's quick. It really can be quick. If I hear a perfect fifth, bum, bum, I don't have to think about it. I didn't have to think of any melody there. I just sang it. I can hear a perfect fourth and that bird over there. You know, I can hear a lot of intervals, but I don't have to think about them. I just know what the intervals are. Now, the trick is remembering the sequence and having a good enough memory to be able to write down what you're hearing. But that's a different thing altogether. Start with just hearing the intervals. It's also a good idea to try and gamify the system a little bit. So try and get 20 perfect fifths and perfect fourths right in a row. So maybe you record yourself and you go slow so you don't make mistakes, but play a combination randomly of perfect fifth and perfect fourth. So you play a perfect fifth, wait like 3 seconds, and you'll say perfect fifth. Then you play a perfect fourth, wait a few seconds, then play perfect fourth. And the goal is when you play back the recording, if you do 20, it'll be long enough that you'll forget the sequence, and then that'll train your ear. You can also just take my Flawless course, because I do that in there, and I do a lot of other exercises. But this is not about that. Not about trying to get you to go get that course. I'm trying to just give you the tips you need to do this on your own. But gamifying it can be really fun. and it can be a good way for you to start to learn how to do this. All right, so let's talk a little bit. I have some notes here just so that I stay on track. Common mistakes beginners make with interval training. All right, so the first one is on relying only on visual or theory-based approaches. So if you only rely on actually kind of associating a perfect fifth with a visual of a perfect fifth, either the printed P5 or actually seeing a perfect fifth on a staff, if that is the only way you do it, then it's going to take you out of just hearing the pure sounds. And I do recommend you develop your visual ability to see a score in your mind, but it's a little more advanced. What we want to do in the beginning, somebody must be here. What we want to do in the beginning is really just focus on the sound. So avoid trying to associate anything visual, just listen, okay? And yeah, a lot of times we'll skip singing out loud. That's an important point. We might not have a very wide range. Maybe you can only sing a perfect fifth at first. But if you keep practicing, your range will improve. And even if you can only sing a perfect fifth, sing a perfect fifth over and over again. Just bum, 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 and change the rhythm up. Bum, 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 bum. Don't always sing it with the same exact rhythm, just so that you can start hearing it in different ways. And so you can actually practice vocalizing. The other part of that is inner hearing, hearing it internally. You want to be able to also hear things internally. Oh, trying to learn all the intervals at once is a big mistake people make. It's what most of the colleges do. They will say, okay, I want you to learn all these intervals. And they'll just give you like 12 intervals and they'll say, just listen to them until you can figure out. It's not what you want to do. You want to isolate and hear 1 or 2 intervals at a time. Oh, there's a deer. I'm going to show you. So the dogs, they're barking at that deer over there, who is being highly inappropriate for YouTube right now. Unbelievable. That deer, what are you doing? So sorry, there's some dog barking, but I'm not going to edit these. I'm putting these out there. It's a one-stop thing. You know, you get what you get. So let's see. Yeah, don't try and learn all the intervals at once, 2 at a time. Comparisons. So perfect fifth, perfect fourth, compare. Major third, minor third, compare. Combine now. Perfect fifth, perfect fourth, major third, minor third. Now major 6, minor 6, compare. Now all 3 sets. Perfect fifth to minor 6, and just keep going that way. And what will happen is when you start to get to the end of the sequence, it's only when you can identify all the intervals instantly that suddenly the brain clicks. I can't explain it. You have to experience it. But when you get to the end and you can hear all these intervals really well, that's when it just kind of clicks and you're able to hear just about everything. And this is what happens when I teach students who are trying to get into a graduate program. They've already had 2 years of ear training minimum, and they're trying to do their ear training, and they usually have like a month and a half to do it. And so I basically just tell them, sing the intervals, you know, and I will evaluate their weaknesses and we'll work on specific techniques for them. But the biggest thing is you need to go to a piano, press a note, sing an interval above and below. Start with the fifth, then do the fourth, then do the thirds, the sixes, the sevenths, the seconds, tritones. That is your warm-up every day. If it takes you 20 minutes, you do it every single day. And what happens is it's not the ideal way to do this. It doesn't lay that permanent foundation, but it opens up the ear quite a bit to the point where they can succeed in a graduate program. Because the truth is, I've worked with a lot of graduate students. They don't always have the best ears, but they're great musicians, you know. All right, so there's a lot of free tools. You know, you can use any app you want. You can go ahead and use my Flawless Ear Training course. That'll help you. But whatever you do, you don't want to just do random drilling. Random drilling doesn't teach you. And random drilling in a way, it's almost easier sometimes when you have all the intervals available to you. So you want to make sure that you're not just going through these apps and using them in the way that they are intended, because you want to, after you hear an interval, sing it back. You want to hear it internally. You want to get into the interval. You want to say, that sounded different than the previous one. You just want to make that acknowledgement. Perfect fifth sounds more open than the fourth. This interval, I got it wrong, but how did it sound different from the previous one this app gave me? Oh, it was more closed. It was more dissonant. Just constantly make these acknowledgements, and that will help you improve quite a bit more. And, oh, huge, don't get discouraged. You got to push through plateaus. You're going to be stuck on something for months. I remember when I was trying to hear and develop my ear, the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth, when I first started doing that, that's what I started with, and I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to hear this. But I knew it was possible because I was listening to Grandfather Clock, and I just heard a major third, and I just instantly knew that's a major third, and it was clear as day to me, and I couldn't possibly mistake it for any other interval. And then I realized I didn't use any gimmick for that. I just heard it, and that's what it was. And so I knew that it was possible. And so, I mean, I probably spent weeks, maybe even months, just drilling the fifth and the fourth. I created like 2,000 audio files to train myself. And what I would do is it'd play an interval, and then I'd look up and check the file name. And I'd say, okay, it's the perfect fifth. I got that one right. And then the next one, oh, it's the perfect fourth. I got that one wrong. And I just did this over and over again, and then finally it clicked. And I never had to think about a perfect fifth or a perfect fourth again. I just heard them. Occasionally, if they're out of tune, I'll get a little confused because it's kind of bridging the gap between a fourth and a fifth, perhaps. But when they're in tune, I never get confused, or even if they're just a little bit out of tune. And so just don't get discouraged, because that was my first plateau. And then a lot of other things went a little more smoothly because now I knew what was possible. I was like, okay, I'm on to something. This works. And then what happened after that was the next big error was chords. You know, I could hear inversions of chords. At first, I could just hear major, minor, augmented, diminished, and I would get augmented and diminished confused. Then I kind of mastered that, and then I was like, okay, now I need to try and hear inversions, which I thought was impossible. And I could hear them in close position, but all of a sudden when you open them up, I couldn't hear the inversion anymore. And what I realized was you have to get to the root of the chord as quickly as possible. And then over time, you start to get this sense, I hear the root, the third, or the fifth, and the bass. And that was a huge plateau for me. I didn't think I'd ever break through it, but I kept practicing, and I did. And so that's what you have to do. When you get stuck, keep practicing. That's the goal. So look, you're not tone deaf, most likely. You just haven't trained yet. So I believe that interval training is learnable, no matter your background. And interval training leads to other things like chords, chord progressions, melodies, hearing harmonies in your head. It opens up the door for a lot of other advanced skills. But it's important to be consistent. Don't spend more than 45 minutes a day. Honestly, you could spend about 25 to 30 minutes and that'd be fine. And in the beginning, you could spend 10 minutes a day. What's important is developing consistency. So come in every day, put in at least 5 to 10 minutes, and then over time, you'll gradually increase that. So, you know, this is just kind of a primer. I'm going to do some more videos like this that take this kind of to the next level and give you some more step-by-step guidance. And please let me know if you have any questions, because I will do my best to answer them. And we can keep going through this together. I'm going to keep trying to post more and more videos like this just to help you out.